Anthony Albanese isn't under pressure. He's losing control, not of the media, not of the narrative, but of his own party. Right now, behind closed doors in Canberra, Labor MPs aren't asking if this government is in trouble. They're asking how much longer they can survive with this man leading them. And that's not speculation. That's fear. Because after the Bondi Junction attack, something snapped. Not publicly, privately, inside Labor's inner circles, inside offices where loyalty used to be automatic. What Australians saw on TV was hesitation. What Labor MPs saw was something far worse, a Prime Minister who freezes when the pressure spikes. And now, with a royal commission looming, with polling sliding, with voters already angry about cost of living, Labor is staring down a brutal question they never wanted to ask this early. Do we cut him loose or let him sink us all? If leadership matters to you when everything goes wrong, stay with me, because what really happened after Bondi tells you everything about where this government is heading. And trust me, it's not where Labor hoped. When the Bondi Junction attack happened, Australia didn't need spin. It didn't need perfectly polished words. It didn't need focus-grouped empathy. Australians needed something simple: reassurance, clarity, presence. Moments like that strip leadership down to its bones. No policy, no slogans, no culture war distractions, just a single question hanging in the air. Is the person running the country actually in control? And for a lot of Australians watching that week, the answer felt deeply uncomfortable. Instead of commanding the moment, the Prime Minister looked tentative. Instead of anchoring the national mood, he drifted. Prepared statements landed flat, public appearances felt delayed, and while state leaders stepped forward to fill the vacuum, the country noticed something unsettling. The federal leader wasn't leading. Now, pause for a second and put yourself in that moment. If this had happened in your city, if this fear had ripped through your community, would that response have made you feel steadier or more uncertain? Because inside Labor, MPs were asking the exact same question, and many of them didn't like the answer. If that moment stuck with you, drop a quick comment saying leadership, because you're not alone in that feeling. But here's where this story turns darker, because while Australians were still processing the tragedy, Labor MPs were already processing something else entirely. What you didn't see on TV was the panic, not public outrage, private dread. Within hours, conversations inside Labor shifted tone. This wasn't about optics anymore. This wasn't about messaging. This was about survival. And here's the key detail most people miss. This wasn't coming from serial complainers on the back bench. This wasn't factional noise. This wasn't ambition bubbling up from rivals. This was coming from people who needed Albanese to succeed. Ministers, senior MPs, party figures who understand polling better than Twitter ever will. They watched the response unfold in real time and quietly realized something terrifying. When the stakes are highest, he doesn't rise, he shrinks. And politics is ruthless about one thing above all else: perception. Once MPs believe their leader can't handle a crisis, everything changes. Loyalty becomes conditional, silence becomes strategic, and suddenly people start asking questions they never thought they'd have to ask this soon. Questions like, what happens if there's another crisis? What happens during an election campaign? What happens when the Royal Commission drags this out for months? Here's the wait, what moment that shook Labor insiders. Some MPs started floating resignation scenarios before polling had even fully landed, not because the numbers were already catastrophic, but because they feared what was coming next. That's not opposition pressure, that's internal alarm bells. If you were an MP staring down re-election, would you bet your future on a leader who freezes under fire? Think about that, then keep watching, because the fear inside Labor only intensified when one word entered the conversation: Royal Commission. Royal Commissions don't move fast. They grind, they resurface wounds, they replay failures, they force leaders to relive moments they'd rather forget. And politically, they're a nightmare, because every hearing becomes a headline, every testimony becomes a reminder, every media cycle drags the story back into the spotlight. Labor strategists understand this better than anyone. This isn't a one-week storm, this is a slow bleed. And here's Albanese's problem. Every public appearance connected to the Commission reopens the same question: where was the leadership when it mattered most? There's one moment Labor insiders are particularly nervous about, a moment that hasn't even happened yet, when questioning shifts from operational failures to accountability at the top. That's when the pressure stops being abstract and becomes personal. And the brutal truth is this: Albanese doesn't perform well under sustained scrutiny. He's not dominant, he's not commanding, he doesn't reset narratives. And in a Royal Commission environment, that weakness gets exposed over and over again. If you think this commission will haunt Labor all year, tap the like button, because this story is far from over. But Bondi didn't create this problem, it exposed it. Bondi wasn't the beginning, it was the breaking point. For months, Albanese's leadership has been slowly losing altitude, not in dramatic freefall, but in quiet erosion. Cost of living pressures keep tightening, housing affordability feels out of reach, energy bills keep climbing, and every time Australians hear promises instead of relief, frustration hardens. Labor knows this. Polling hasn't collapsed, but it's sliding. Soft support is turning brittle, and marginal seat MPs are feeling it first. Then came the Voice referendum, a defining moment that was supposed to unite the country and instead exposed a brutal disconnect. Labor underestimated voter scepticism, overestimated moral authority, and misread the national mood. That defeat didn't just hurt politically, it damaged credibility. Because once voters feel you're not listening, trust doesn't bounce back easily. And here's the part most commentators gloss over. Albanese didn't just lose the referendum, he lost the perception that he understands ordinary Australians. If your weekly bills are higher, if your rent keeps climbing, if your wages aren't stretching, do you feel heard right now? If the answer is not really, comment same, because that sentiment is exactly what Labor MPs are terrified of. And inside the party, the tone shifted from concern to something sharper: fear. Elections aren't won on vibes, they're won on momentum. And right now, Labor has none. Marginal seat MPs are staring at angry town halls. Volunteers are losing enthusiasm. Internal research is flashing warnings. And here's the cold calculation happening inside Labor offices. Albanese doesn't inspire swing voters. He doesn't dominate media cycles. He doesn't neutralise attacks. In a calm environment, that's survivable. In a cost of living crisis, in the shadow of a royal commission, it's deadly. Here's the moment that made jaws drop inside the party. Some MPs quietly started arguing that changing leaders might actually save seats, not lose them. That's how deep the anxiety runs. Not because they hate Albanese, but because they don't trust him to fight. If you were facing re-election and knocking on doors where voters are furious, who would you want leading your campaign? A steady administrator or a political brawler? Drop your honest take in the comments. But here's the part no one wants to say publicly. This outcome didn't blindside Labor. They accepted it. When Albanese was chosen as leader, the logic was simple: safe, familiar, inoffensive.
He wasn't Morrison. He wasn't chaotic. He wasn't threatening. And in 2022, that worked. Australia was exhausted. Voters wanted calm. They wanted stability. But here's the problem. What works in recovery doesn't work in crisis. Stability becomes passivity. Caution becomes weakness. Safety becomes stagnation. Labor bet that voters would stay patient. They didn't. Australians didn't vote for fragility. They didn't vote for hesitation. They didn't vote for a leader who disappears when things get ugly. If you think parties should be punished for playing it too safe, say accountability in the comments. Because now Labor is paying the price for its own calculation. And that price isn't abstract. It hits you directly.
When a Prime Minister loses internal authority, government stops working. Not officially, not publicly, but practically. Ministers hesitate. Bold ideas get shelved. Decisions slow down. Why push hard policy when the leader might not be there tomorrow? Why take risks when survival becomes the priority? And while Canberra freezes, real life doesn't. Your rent still rises, your power bill still stings, your grocery costs still climb. Weak leadership doesn't just fail politically, it costs you money, it costs you time, it costs you momentum. And the most infuriating part? While Australians absorb the impact, politicians obsess over internal numbers. If you feel ignored while power struggles play out, comment where you're watching from, because this frustration isn't isolated. So where does this leave Albanese? In a trap. There's no clean exit. If Albanese stays, pressure intensifies. Every Royal Commission headline chips away. Every poll drop feeds internal panic. If he goes, Labor detonates itself mid-term. Leadership spills, media chaos, opposition attacks. There's no winning move, only damage control. And that's why Labor is frozen, waiting, hoping, delaying. But history is cruel to leaders who hesitate too long. If you had to bet right now, does he make it through the year? Type yes or no below, because the next few months will decide everything. This isn't just about Bondi. It's about leadership under pressure. It's about what happens when the calm facade cracks, when private doubts turn into public consequences, when a government realises too late that safety isn't strength. Labor can ignore the warning signs, or it can act. But either way, the clock is ticking, and history doesn't go easy on leaders who fail to meet the moment. If you want coverage that doesn't protect power, subscribe now, because what happens next in Canberra won't be quiet, and it won't be kind.